Let me tell you what my deep research and basically vision is.
I hope there's Bigfoot. I don't think there is.
I'm not telling you nothing.
The aliens won't let it happen.
Happening now, breaking.
Bernie Sanders is angry.
Bears beats Battlestar Galactica.
What are the tips? Give me some tips on how to work with Wes Anderson.
Be ready to speak very fast and very clearly, because that's definitely one key thing.
I will only tell the truth.
Until you and 6 kids you barely know in wet bathing suits have surrounded 9 chimpanzees outside of a Wendy's. You probably really don't know yourself, okay?
Yep. And we back.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to your new favorite podcast in the best in political, sports, and paranormal news coverage. I'm your host, Wes Anderson, and this is In the Shed. This is episode 38, so whether you're back for more or finding us for the first time this week, hey, thanks for tuning in. It is early Friday morning, April 15th, and I am in a shed in the backyard of my home in Alabama. Also, I can hang out with you tools and talk about the latest headlines, stories, and rumors in the world of politics, sports, and the paranormal. My tools, my people, how are you? It is good to be back in the shed with you again, finally. It's been a couple weeks. This is a show that is intended to be a weekly news show, but life happens. Our family is in that stage of parenting where our children are both in their first year of school. My daughter Layla is in kindergarten in her first year of elementary school, and my son Malachi has just started preschool this year, and it just seems like there is sickness in our house always. Somebody always sick, and we are building up our immune systems together. So I have been at home with sick children this week, been busy with work, and of course there are bills to pay, there are chores to be done, things to be kept up with, appointments to be made, etc., etc., etc. It has been a long couple weeks, and it has been a busy couple weeks. And even though I am tired, mind, body, and spirit, I'm also grateful, man. I'm also grateful. I have been learning a lot about gratitude lately. You ever have a time where it seems like a certain idea or a certain phrase just keeps popping up everywhere? For me, that's been happening lately with gratitude. And when these things happen, I try to pay attention. I try to take it as, hey, this is something I need to work on. This is something I need to learn about. This is something that keeps popping up for a reason. I was listening to a podcast, and I listen to so many podcasts, I couldn't even tell you honestly what show it was. But I was listening to another podcast, and this guy was telling a story. He was saying that he had made some money, had done well for himself, he and his wife, and so they were building their dream home. It was a home that, as a kid, he would have looked at and called a mansion. And things just weren't going well. If you've ever had to deal with contractors, no offense if you are one, if you've ever had to do a major construction project, you know that things don't always go as planned. So he was building his dream house, and things were running behind schedule. Work days were being rained out. Things were taking longer to be delivered. And so he was really frustrated. He was really upset. The designs weren't right. Just nothing was going as it was supposed to. So one day he and his wife are on their way to dinner, and they're going to stop by the property so that he can basically ream out the workers, give them the kick in the pants that they need to get things back on schedule. So he gets there, he parks his truck, he walks inside, he's furious, he's angry, he's unhappy. And when he walks in, he sees the construction workers. He says that a majority of them are guys from Mexico. And they're there. They're working on this house. They've got music playing. They're dancing. They're laughing. They're working hard. They've been there all day. They're having a great time. They're using their skills and their abilities. They're working hard, but they're having a good time. And it bothered him. It just bothered him. It bothered him. He started thinking, why is it that the people building the mansion are 50 times more happy than the person who's actually going to live in it? And he said for him, it was like a wake-up call that something was wrong in his life. And what he discovered it was that he was not a grateful person. So I heard this story on this other podcast, and it really hit me. And I think I've probably told this story now to about 14 different people. And if you're one of those folks and you're listening to this episode, you had to hear it again. I apologize. But it hit me because I'm not always a grateful person. A lot of times I tend to look at the problems. I tend to look at the things that aren't as they should be, the areas in which I fall short, the areas in which I do not compare, or my lifestyle does not compare to those around me or to the goals that I have set that are yet unaccomplished. And I forget to be grateful. And after I heard that story, gratitude started popping up. I heard this guy on the radio talking about gratitude. The scripture that I read in my morning devotion the next day was about gratitude. All week long, it was just gratitude, gratitude, gratitude. And it's like, hey, maybe you're supposed to pay attention. Maybe you're supposed to learn. Maybe this is something you need to improve on, big dog. So I started thinking about gratitude. And like the easy thing to do is just to be like, okay, let me make a list of all the things that I'm grateful for, my wife, my children, my house. And I do that from time to time. But even more than that, I started to realize that being grateful is a discipline. It's a discipline. Being grateful is a muscle that is capable of being strengthened as you work it out. The more you work out your muscle of gratitude, the stronger it gets and the more grateful of a person you become. And here's the thing about gratitude. I think for most of my life, I thought that gratitude came from happiness. I did. For most of my life, I thought that gratitude came from happiness. That when life was going well, when you were doing well, when things were happening the way that they should, when you were a happy person, you had a lot of things to be grateful for and you tended to be more grateful. But what I'm learning is actually the inverse. It's actually the inverse. Your gratitude does not come from being happy, but your happiness flows out of your gratitude. Your happiness, your level of happiness in your life is inextricably connected to your gratitude. If you're not happy, if you're not a happy person, if you're filled with anger, if you're filled with pessimism, if you're stuck in a rut, if you're disappointed with your station in life, with what you have accomplished, if things aren't as they should be, it might be because you're not a grateful person. It might be because you haven't been practicing gratitude. That's not a part of your discipline. That's not a muscle that gets worked out very much in your life. When you're grateful with what you have, no matter what it is, you become happier. You become a more well-adjusted person. You keep things in perspective. You're able to keep your life in the lines a little bit more. Your happiness is inextricably connected and flows out of your gratitude. And I have a lot to be grateful for, even with sick children, even with bills that are more than I wish they were and overdue, even if I don't make the money that I wish I made. Even if I have goals that are yet accomplished, I have so much to be grateful for. And what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to be the type of person that allows the circumstances of life and the busyness of life to sap the joy from me. I'm going to choose to be grateful. I'm going to remind myself to be grateful. I'm going to count my blessings. I'm going to work out that muscle of gratitude and make sure that it becomes a discipline that I have. And I think that's something that we all should do. All right, enough of that. Let's get to some comments and corrections from our last episode. Keystone 397, Hanobia 376, Townsend 291. Townsend 291. That's right. The Smoky Mountain Bigfoot Festival in Townsend, Tennessee is right around the corner, my babies. It's on May the 7th. I have not been invited. My son's second birthday is also on May the 7th. And Mother's Day is the very next day. So I had an idea. I pitched the idea to the wife that we celebrated my son's second birthday and Mother's Day by going to the Smoky Mountain Bigfoot Festival. It didn't fly. Maybe next year. We are somehow up over 4,000 followers on Twitter now. Not sure how that has happened. We're almost to our goal of 5,000 for the year. You can follow the show there at In the Shed 4. I would love to connect with you on Twitter. You can also support the show in two ways. One is by signing up for our newsletter. Are you getting our newsletter? Are you one of the 6 or 7 people that have signed up already? If not, you are missing out. It's a great way to keep up with the show. You get some exclusive content, and it's only $4 a month. $1 a week, my babies. $4 a month. To sign up for the newsletter, you can DM us on Twitter, or you can email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. The other way to support the show is by downloading the Mercari app. That's MERCARI, Mercari. And finding our account at In the Shed and buying something. We've got all kinds of stuff for sale. We've got some John Deere salt and pepper shakers. We've got a host of autographs, some awesome paintings, a couple of oversized LeBron James Funko Pop figurines, some sports memorabilia, pocket knives, a ton of books, and all kinds of other cool stuff. And if you download the app and you find something you want, if you message us first before buying and let us know that you listen to the show, we will give you a 10% discount on the listed price. Pretty good deal. So please support the show by downloading the Mercari app and buying something, by emailing the show at intheshedwithwes and signing up for the newsletter. We certainly would appreciate it. Our show continues to grow both in the U.S. and across the globe. We're being heard in 20 nations now. We've continued finding a listener base in India, which now makes up over 36% of our listener base. And hey, India, I got love for you. Ramesh, I hope that you're well. Apparently you are still listening to the show and spreading the word. Hey, put me on a billboard in India. I want to be on a billboard in India. And I'm contractually obligated to say that at this point, 38 episodes in. It's wild. I never thought that I would have a fan base in India, but here we are, and I love it. The U.S., of course, makes up 56% of our listener base. The U.K. is at 2%. France also at 2%. Australia at 1%. What's up, Aussies? And a host of other countries are chipping in too. But listen, wherever and however you're listening to the show, whether on the Good Pods app, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, I'm thankful. I appreciate it. I'm grateful even. Please do us a solid. Leave us a 5-star review. If you continue to subscribe, like, share, and review the show, we will continue growing this thing together. We're going to have an empire out of a shed in my backyard in Alabama. On episode 36, I mistakenly said Andrew Cuomo while covering an article about Jen Psaki's potential move to mainstream media. Of course, I meant Chris. They're brothers, and they're both embroiled in controversy. My bad. As it turns out, Simone Sanders works for MSNBC. I wasn't sure. While covering the prospects of a future Logan Paul presidency, I accidentally mixed up brothers Jake and Logan. It happens. And during our March Madness coverage, I said San Diego State at least twice when in fact I meant South Dakota State. Jackrabbit fans, I apologize. Okay, we've got a great show for you tonight, but first let's get to some listener emails. Our first email comes from Byron from Ohio, who writes, Wes, was wondering if you saw President Biden's many missteps while traveling internationally as of late. Was hoping to get your take on those. Hey Byron, thanks for listening to the show. My guess is that you are referencing when President Biden visited troops in, was it Poland? And he told American troops about the bravery of the Ukrainian forces and said, you'll see when you get there. That certainly raised some eyebrows. And then in a speech a day or so later, it seemed that he suggested that Vladimir Putin be removed from office. Yeah, look, both of those things were surprising and were problematic. The White House immediately walked back both of those comments and said that they were cherry-picked and taken out of context. I don't know. I don't know that they were. I think the president was speaking off the cuff, which is not his strength. And I think he said some things that he probably shouldn't have said. When Joe Biden was running for president, one critique he had of Donald Trump was he said that the words of a president matter. And I happen to agree with him. That was one of the reasons I did not cast a vote or support President Trump, because I did not appreciate the way that he acted and behaved. And I would like to have a president that I could be excited about my child growing up to be like. And a lot of times Donald Trump's words were not appropriate and were unbecoming of the office. But hey, you're the president now, and your words matter too. And when Putin has an itchy trigger finger, I don't think those are things that you should be saying. And to me, even the bigger problem is the way that the White House handled it, basically just denying it, even though we can look up the articles and read the quotes. We can listen to the speech and hear what the man said. And they're basically like, nope, didn't happen. Hey, we heard it. We saw it. We read it. Yeah, Byron, I don't think that those are even necessarily incidents where he gave away secret information and said things out loud that was supposed to remain quiet. I think he just misspoke. I think that he said things that he shouldn't have said. He said things to the wrong groups of people. And that's just a weakness of his. And his words matter. He needs to be more measured. He needs to be more careful. More informed, and probably stick to the talking points that he is giving. Our next email comes from Sarah from Oregon, who says, Wes, just listened to episode 37 of the show with Chelsea Glasgow. It was such a well-done conversation. Chelsea is so kind and strong. Her story was inspiring. Sarah, thank you so much for writing into the show. I'll pass that along to Chelsea. That's a really nice message. I loved having her on the show. It was awesome to catch up with her. I had a lot of fun during the Cap or Dap segment with Chelsea. I thought that was hysterical. I'm so embarrassed that I could not think of a single Paul Rudd movie because the man truly is delightful. And best believe I went and got the link to his IMDb and I texted it over to Chelsea. But she is strong. She's full of grace. Her story is one worth hearing. That's why I asked her to be on the show. And I so appreciated her time, her honesty. She's a person of grace. And finally, Kendra from Nashville, Tennessee writes, Wes, the next time you think about picking the University of Tennessee to win something, don't. You jinxed us. Yeah, look, I'm sorry, Kendra. Tennessee played so well in the SEC tournament. Their defense was incredible. They had shot makers. I thought Tennessee was going to win the whole darn thing. And I guess I jinxed them. I guess I did. I apologize. But on the bright side, it's almost football season, so you don't really have to worry about me picking Tennessee for anything in a little while. Yeah, but thank you for listening to the show. That's all the listener emails this week. If you have any thoughts that you'd like to share, you can email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Again, that's intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. I might even read it on air. All right, let's switch to this. Let's get to the news in the world of politics, and let's hit the headlines. It was lockdown, not the pandemic, that created the havoc, writes Infowars.com. Joe Biden claims he knew nothing about Hunter's business. Here's 12 times he did, reports the Wall Street Journal. Ukraine seeks ruinous sanctions on Russia amid European hesitancy, says Reuters. From The Guardian, Pyongyang could hold nuclear tests next week, U.S. envoy warns. And finally, Governor Greg Abbott says Texas will bus undocumented immigrants to D.C., and that is according to BuzzFeed News. Our first story in the world of politics, Chris Cuomo, not Andrew, but Chris, is burning down CNN, and he's taking Don Lemon with him. Oh my. Chris Cuomo is burning down the House, starring Queen Latifah. Perhaps we should stand back simply to admire the flames. On Wednesday, Cuomo asked for an arbitrator. That word is hard. On Wednesday, Cuomo asked for an arbitrator to award him $125 million because CNN fired him for what even a first-year journalism student would have understood to be egregious ethical violations. Cuomo's Trumpian-style lack of ethics is old news, but his rationale for demanding enough money to make a tech executive envious is truly novel. I wasn't the only dishonest journalist on CNN's payroll. That's his defense. The man's defense is, I was not the only dishonest journalist there. Okay, let's continue. Exhibit number 1 for the plaintiff is Don Lemon, the CNN host whom Cuomo used to refer to as his brother, which is rich given how quick Cuomo was to nuke journalistic ethics to bail out his brother Andrew. In November, actor Jussie Smollett testified under oath that Lemon had tipped him off that police in Chicago didn't buy his claim that a pair of MAGA hat-wearing thugs had emerged from a snowstorm to beat him up and wrap a rope around his neck. Now, in Lemon's defense, hardly anyone outside of the corridors of CNN believed Smollett's saga when the fable was first told. It shouldn't have been shocking to learn that Chicago cops who hear more credible yarns from truant 8th graders also had their doubts. But I digress. Don Lemon's decision as a self-confessed journalist to alert Smollett that the cops were onto him was an ethical breach almost as bad as helping a politician, who just so happens to be your brother, cobble together a defense against sexual harassment allegations. Intervening in the ongoing investigation by texting Smollett was an inexcusable breach of ethics, Cuomo's lawyers wrote in the arbitration filing. Yet CNN did nothing. Lemon was not disciplined in any way. For exhibit number 2, there's Jeffrey Toobin, the news network's chief legal analyst who was suspended by CNN in October 2020 and fired by The New Yorker after he was caught enjoying himself during a video call with colleagues at the magazine. CNN welcomed Toobin back into the family last June despite what Cuomo's lawyers describe as a sordid act of harassment. For Exhibit 3, Team Cuomo calls to the stand former CNN President Jeff Zucker, who resigned in February after his personal relationship with Chief Marketing Officer Allison Gollust was disclosed. Gollust also resigned. As long as CNN's ratings would not be hurt, Zucker and Gollust were more than willing to overlook major transgressions by CNN personalities such as Don Lemon and Jake Tapper, or even to engage in blatant misconduct themselves, Cuomo's lawyers declared. Finally, Cuomo gets to the crux of it. It was, is, and always will be about ratings. What's the value of an old-fashioned ethical standard or two weighed in the balance of a journalistic celebrity who can attract enough eyeballs to pay rock star-level salaries? Let's be honest. On one level, CNN is the best reality TV series going. Who needs Desperate Housewives of Missoula when the Cuomo versus Lemon versus Zucker cage match is ready for a rumble? Yet on another level, one I like to call the real world, the timing of Cuomo's high dive into the mud bog is sad. After all, there is a war going on. I mean a real war, not the one inside CNN's C-suite. CNN's journalists have shown a masterful level of skill and professionalism, and in many cases remarkable courage in coverage of the war in Ukraine. This should be their time to both report the news without internal distractions and to receive well-deserved appreciation from their audience and their journalistic peers. Chris Cuomo has shown why it matters to call out and to even handedly discipline bad journalism, including ethical violations. His former CNN colleagues, along with journalists from dozens of other news outlets, have shown every day for the past 3 weeks why good journalism is so vitally important. Cuomo may eventually get his money, but I'll put my money on those other journalists, the ones who understand that serving their audience needs are far more important than serving themselves. So this just keeps getting more and more interesting. Because these Cuomo brothers, they don't know when to stop. Chris Cuomo is like, hey, I'm not going down without a fight. And I'm taking everybody down with me. And I want my money. The man is suing for $125 million. That's a 4-year deal for an NFL starting quarterback. And look, what Chris Cuomo did, it's not defensible. You're a journalist. You're supposed to, and as a fellow journalist, I know this, you're supposed to report the news with integrity and to do your best to remain above the fray. What you're not supposed to do is use your resources and use the relationships that you have attained professionally to help out your brother who is being accused of sexual misconduct. It's unethical and it's not a good look. And so that's not really defensible. He deserved to be fired for that. But on the other hand, he kind of has a point, don't he? Chris Cuomo isn't wrong. He was wrong in his actions. He's also suing for a lot of money. But the man has a point when it comes to the culture at CNN and what was going on there, because Don Lemon did the exact same thing in the Jussie Smollett case. The only difference is that Jussie Smollett is not his actual brother. But he did the same thing. Not to mention the accusations against Don Lemon and what he did one night in a bar, allegedly. Look it up. It's brazen and despicable behavior, and you never hear anything about that. So not only does Chris Cuomo have a point that Don Lemon, the other big star at the network at the time that Cuomo was employed there, was not treated in the same manner for doing similar things, but then there's the case of Jeffrey Toobin, who has a very appropriate last name because that's what he was caught doing on the Zoom call with his coworkers, which is just ludicrous and disgusting and hilarious. And he's their chief legal correspondent. And they brought him back. What are you doing? CNN, what are you doing? CNN brought the man back. He was on a call. He was in a work meeting. And just whipped it out. And they brought him back. And now he talks on air. He analyzes on air the legality of different situations. How absurd. That's like an Onion article come to life. And then even the former president of the whole darn thing, Mr. Zucker, he was in a relationship with someone that he worked with that was his inferior, and he didn't disclose it, which was against the rules. CNN has a problem. And we read the article on one of the last couple episodes. We've been covering CNN. We've been hammering them. And I think fairly. Because they have a problem when it comes to their culture, and it infects everything that they do, including the way that they cover the news. That thing is rotten from the top down. And so a couple episodes ago when we talked about how several members of Congress were afraid that with Jeff Zucker being out at CNN, that democracy would be in peril. And we kind of laughed at that and we mocked it. And we said, hey, this might be an opportunity for CNN to do better. Now you know why. Chris Cuomo putting all the family dirty laundry out there, hanging it up for everybody to see. And he's not wrong. I don't think he'll get $125 million, but to me, this looks like a settlement is what it looks like. I think he's going to get paid. They let him go for things that other people around him were doing that did not face discipline, especially not initially. And I think he's going to get some money for it. I do. I don't think he's going to get 125 mil, but he's going to get a settlement. And the terms aren't going to be public, but I would guess it's going to be in about the $30 or $40 million range. He's going to get paid. He's going to get paid. And I don't wish him that type of success. I don't know the man. I think he probably has enough money as it is. But he's not wrong. He's not wrong. And for CNN to have these people leading their organization and reporting the news, it just kind of tells you what their motivation is. And it puts it out on Front Street. And this is the problem with mainstream media. This is the reason why more and more people are tuning into podcasts like ours, and to independent podcasts, and to independent journalists, and to folks on YouTube, and all these other different streamers and podcasters and writers on Substack, alternative journalists, because they don't trust the people working in mainstream media. They don't trust cable news. And you probably shouldn't. That's all I'm saying. I'm not just trashing CNN. They actually have done a pretty decent job when it comes to their Ukraine coverage. Pretty decent job. But that's about it. And I don't think that Fox News, I don't think the MSNBC, I don't think that they're much better. I don't think that they're much better. I think that they all have their own set of issues in the way that they cover the news. And people are hungry for some honesty. People are hungry for just like, hey, here's what's happening. Trust you're smart enough to make assessments. People want to know the facts. They want to know what's going on. They don't want to be told how to think. They don't want to be shouted out. They don't want to be treated as though they're stupid. They don't want to be stuck in this outrage cycle all the time. And that's all that cable news and mainstream media has become. Because it gets clicks. Because it gets dollar signs. And employing people like this just goes to show what it is that they're after. And it ain't truth. Our next story in the world of politics, 5 buffalo returned to Lipan Apache lands. Lucille Contreras made her way back into her home after spending the morning with the recently rematriated buffalo in early February. 5 buffalo were returned to Lipan Apache lands in Texas through a program by the Nature Conservancy that has given 270 bison back to indigenous nations throughout the country. It feels like the prophecies of our ancestors are being fulfilled by the rematriation of our relatives and reconnecting with each other as indigenous people here in Texas, Contreras said. It feels like answers to prayer. The 5 buffalo joined the herd of 4 that call the Texas Tribal Buffalo Project home in Wilder, about 80 miles east of San Antonio. When the buffalo were introduced to one another, they were initially separated to ensure that the 2 herds would come together harmoniously and there would be no conflict. The buffalo almost immediately broke through the barrier separating them and created a herd of 9. We currently have 1 bull and 8 females, Contreras said. Every day I spend time with these bison. I can tell you, I see a lot of low bellies on the females. It's so exciting, such a blessing. Praying that we have some healthy babies born in the spring and early summer here. This spring, the project may welcome as many as 8 new babies into the herd. In 2020, the Conservancy made it a priority to return a number of buffalo back to indigenous nations. The Conservancy works with the Tanka Fund, which financially supports the transfer. Both organizations work with local nonprofits of tribal governments on the transfer. So far, 12 nations have received buffaloes through this partnership. The buffalo help to maintain the health of the prairies and the grasslands because they've been there traditionally, and the grazing behavior is important to promote natural biodiversity, Suzanne Scott, State Director for the Nature Conservancy in Texas, said. They're critical to the health of a variety of species of plants. Before colonization, millions of buffalo roamed the Great Plains. They were important to many indigenous nations for cultural and practical reasons, providing food, leather, and fur. In Texas, hundreds of thousands of buffalo were slaughtered in the 1870s and 80s so the Transcontinental Railroad could be completed, virtually exterminating them from the state. The only buffalo that remained were protected on government property or private ranches. I felt so much healing and strength from being with the buffalo, Contreras said. If I feel this way, I know many other people that are part of the Buffalo Nation back home here in Texas could benefit from reconnecting with the buffalo as well. Before becoming the founder and CEO of the Texas Tribal Buffalo Project, Contreras worked in the information technology sector for 27 years. During the pandemic, she didn't feel safe at work and worried about catching COVID-19, so she left her job to pursue a new passion. For 6 years, Contreras lived in Oglala, Lakota lands in Porcupine, South Dakota, and there she connected with the Knife Chief Buffalo Nation Society, a nonprofit that is committed to caring for members of the Buffalo Nation as relatives and learning from them. This is where she learned from caretaker Edward Ironclad III how to care for and maintain a buffalo herd. For 3 years, an application for a U.S. Department of Agricultural beginning farmer and rancher loan sat on her desk before she finally submitted it. In August 2020, she applied for a loan and was granted one. Contreras began looking for land to purchase on the traditional homelands of the Lipan Apache Band. The Lipan Apache Band of Texas are not state or federally recognized. They have their own officials and enrollment with 745 members according to their website. The Lipan Apache Band is separate from the Lipan Apache tribe of Texas. Our programs are not specifically for the Lipan Apache, but also to include other Texas indigenous groups who have similar experiences, Contreras said. The Lipan Apache consists of many various bands and clans, but we are still one nation growing together in our unity. With lots of prayers and offerings, Contreras chose 77 acres in Welder, where the herd of buffalo now roam. The goal of the Texas Tribal Buffalo Project is to heal intergenerational trauma by helping indigenous people of Texas reconnect with the buffalo. The project invites any indigenous person from Texas to come and visit with the buffalo. We always welcome and invite folks to come out here and visit and spend time with the buffalo, Contreras said. That's truly the best medicine, I feel. These bison are the #1 stewards of the land, and we can learn a lot from them. The Nature Conservancy has more than 6,000 bison that roam 113,000 acres of land in 10 different states. It's the largest private buffalo herd in the country. To ensure the lands the buffalo reside on remain healthy, the buffalo herds have to be managed, and surplus buffalo are sold. The profits from the sale of 1,500 buffalo a year ago went back into local conservation efforts and the operating budget for local chapters of the Conservancy. So I thought that was a pretty cool story and something worth talking about on the show. I try my best to give you some good news and to give you some news that you're not hearing reported on mainstream media or on the cable news networks. And this is an example of that. It's undeniable that one of the greatest sins of our nation, one of the original sins of our nation, in addition to slavery, is the way that the first peoples, those who already lived on this land, were treated. The way that they were put on reservations and slaughtered and stolen from and decimated and lied to, even in treaties by the American government. I remember learning about Standing Rock and Wounded Knee and the Trail of Tears. And I've had the opportunity to visit with some Native American folks some years back at a powwow on Native American land. And you see the effects of everything that happened hundreds of years ago, a couple hundred years ago, even today. And how the mistreatment and the inhumane action toward them, how remnants of that remain generationally even now. And so to see things like this that are actually positive, that are actually good, that are actually giving back, somebody that has made this their mission to return buffalo that were slaughtered in mass so that a railroad could be built. In some parts of the country, they were slaughtered in mass simply because Native Americans needed them for food. And settlers and the U.S. Army wanted Native Americans out of that place. To see all these years later that these buffalo are being returned to these Native people and nations is a pretty dope thing in my mind. And it's going to be good for the land. It's a win-win for everybody. It's good for the population of the American buffalo in the Southwest and in the United States. It's good for the land as the buffalo will help steward it and take care of it. It's good for the indigenous people who are native to that area. It's a win-win-win. And it's a bit of good news, and it's somebody who's using their abilities to accomplish something good in this world. And I salute that. Sometimes on Twitter, I will take a snapshot of a book that I'm reading and share with you a little bit about it. I've been doing a lot of reading about Native Americans. It's a very interesting topic to me, their history, their leaders, their accomplishments, their culture. And I saw this article shared there, and I thought that this was worthwhile, and I wanted to bring it to your attention as well. Our next story in the world of politics, Elon Musk buys 9.2% of Twitter, making him the largest shareholder. Elon Musk recently purchased 9.2% of Twitter stock according to a filing, making him the largest shareholder in the company. News of the purchase sent shares of Twitter soaring 22% in early trading. Musk did not disclose what he paid for the shares, but his stake was worth $2.9 billion as of close of trade on Friday and $3.5 billion after the spike on early Monday. Musk's filing did not disclose the purpose of the purchase or any plans for the company, but he has been a high-profile critic of Twitter policies in the past. Last month, he said he was giving serious thought to creating a new social media platform. Given that Twitter serves as the de facto public town square, failing to adhere to free speech principles fundamentally undermines democracy, Musk tweeted last month. What should be done? Anytime an investor buys 5% or more of a company's shares, they must disclose the purchase in filings with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Although a stake of less than 10% in a company is considered passive in the eyes of Wall Street, it could signal an effort by Musk to take a more active role in how Twitter is run. That is one of the factors prompting other investors to buy shares and drive up the price early Monday. I think he intends to go active and force change at Twitter, said Dan Ives, tech analyst at Wedbush Securities. This is a shot across the bow at Twitter's board and management team to start discussions. Even if Musk doesn't try to change the way Twitter operates, his large purchase could prompt some other activist investors to take a stake in the company as well. One way or another, he's going to change the course of Twitter, Ives said. Ives said it's probably not realistic for Musk or anyone else to try to start building a new competing platform from scratch. Thus, it makes more sense for him to try and change practices at Twitter himself. Twitter did not have an immediate response to a request for comment on Musk's investment. So, we pretty much didn't have a choice but to talk about Elon Musk and Twitter. It's been trending everywhere all week long. And when I first put this show together in preparation for recording, it was just that Elon Musk had bought 9.2% of Twitter and was the leading shareholder. But even since then, things have taken more than one turn. First, Elon Musk said that he intended to join the board of Twitter and was offered a seat on the board, which would give him a lot of influence on how the company is run. But as it turned out, what he was offered, his role on the board came with stipulations that were very clearly meant to limit his ability to make wide-sweeping changes. He was offered a seat on the board with the stipulation that he couldn't ever own more than 14.9% of the company and that he would have to be declared as a legal fiduciary of the company, meaning that anything that he did had to be in the best interest of the whole company. And with stipulations like that, the rest of the board could say, hey, Elon, we don't want to do that. We don't want to change that policy. We don't believe that's in the best interest of the company. And his hands would be tied. So Elon Musk turned down the seat on the board. There began to be rumors swirling around online about would he or would he not do a hostile takeover of some sort. And then Elon Musk offered to buy the whole darn company for $41 billion in cash. Like $54 a share or something like that. $41 billion. There has been no response that I have seen to that offer from Twitter officially, but a lot of people found out after this offer was made that one of the largest shareholders in Twitter happens to be Saudi royalty. Yeah, it takes another turn. People were like, wait a second. You mean to tell me that one of the largest shareholders in a company that is being criticized over the issue of free speech is someone from the Saudi royal family. Makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? So here we are. Elon Musk is trying to buy Twitter. Twitter doesn't appear to want to play ball. He owns more shares than anybody else. And he's kind of got him in a tough spot because let's say they decide not to sell to Elon Musk, which is very, very likely. If he wanted to, he could then sell all of his shares of Twitter in one fell swoop. And that would crash, I think, would crash the value of Twitter. So he owns 9.2%. He has them between a rock and a hard place. And he wants to see some changes. And it's been really interesting on my Twitter feed because our Twitter feed for this show is very different than most. It's such a wide swath of humanity. You have folks that just love sports and want to talk NBA basketball. You have folks that are into Bigfoot and aliens. You got a whole bunch of folks from India. And then you have some very, very conservative Trump-supporting people and some very, very left-leaning people. It's an interesting subsection of society on our Twitter feed. And what I've noticed is that the more conservative people are celebrating Elon Musk's activity. He's becoming a hero for them. They want him to buy Twitter. They want him to make sweeping changes to reinstate Alex Jones and Donald Trump. And the left is saying, if Elon Musk owns Twitter, I'm out. I'm out of here. I'm off the platform. I have no interest. I don't want to do it. And then there's some people that are like, hey, I heard Twitter's going to cost $2 a month. Please don't do that. Nah, it's not going to cost $2 a month. But the newsletter for In the Shed with Wes is only $4 a month. So sign up for our newsletter by emailing us at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Yeah. We say on this show all the time that two things can be true at once. And that we need both the left wing and the right wing of this beautiful bald eagle in order for it to soar. And I believe that to my core. One of my favorite things about this show and about our Twitter feed is that we have people who participate that think differently from one another, that have different views, that come from different perspectives, that have lived different lives. And I value that. That's how you learn. And I think that there's some validity to both perspectives on this matter. On the one hand, the left keeps saying that Twitter is a private company, that they can put into place whatever policies they wish, and they can set their own rules. And I agree with that. I understand that thinking. I understand that rationale. It's not that I want people on Twitter who are saying horrible things, who are Holocaust deniers, who are spreading misinformation, who are doing all these terrible things. I don't. But on the other hand, when the right comes in and says, you know what, though? Twitter has, even though it's a private company, it has really grown beyond that. And now it's like the public square. It's a place that information is shared and spread, that news articles are posted. And I got to be honest, I think there's some validity in that perspective as well. And some of what Twitter has done in recent months and in the last year during the lockup has been suspicious at best, because some of the things that they have labeled as misinformation or blocked or thrown off of Twitter haven't really made a lot of sense to me. I'll give you a couple of examples. The lab leak theory. There was a time, and this is not right-wing talking points, this is factual information. I saw this happen. There was a time where you could get suspended from Twitter. You could get banned temporarily or even removed from Twitter for sharing the lab leak theory, the theory that COVID-19 didn't come from eating bats, didn't come from a wet market in Wuhan, but it actually was accidentally something that escaped from a lab. And that was the case for quite a while, that sharing articles saying that much, sharing that opinion was not allowed on Twitter, was labeled as misinformation. It's something not even worthy of being discussed, that you were somehow putting others at risk. Fast forward several months into the pandemic, and the Jon Stewart clip happens where he's on with Colbert, and he says, hey, maybe we should consider all options. If we really want to beat COVID, if we want to get to the bottom of this, if we want to do the best we can of saving lives, maybe we should investigate all options of how this started. And the fact that Wuhan, where COVID-19 originated, has a lab that studies the effects of coronavirus, like maybe that's worth considering. And the tide started to change. And people started to say, well, even the Biden administration at one point said, well, we don't really know, and that's a possibility that we're looking into. And all of a sudden, nothing is said, no apologies, no reinstatements, but you can talk about it on Twitter. And I'm not even saying that's where COVID came from. I'm saying, doesn't it make sense to investigate all possibilities? And why are we not allowed to talk about it on your platform? Another example is this whole fiasco with Hunter Biden and his business dealings, or maybe I should say misdealings. And we haven't talked about that a lot on this show because I can't make heads or tails of it. It's so partisan. It's such team politics that it's hard to find actual good reporting. But if there is a possibility that the president's son was using his father's position of influence and his connection to the White House to make money from foreign governments and from foreign oligarchs, that certainly is something that we should be talking about and that we should be looking at. And I would say the same if it was Donald Trump's son, if it was George Bush's son, if it was Barack Obama's daughter. I would say the same thing. Because I'm tired of politicians being corrupt. And I'm tired of politicians and their family members that use their position and their power and their influence to enrich themselves instead of to help the people. So it is a story that matters, and it is something that is important that we should get to the bottom of so that we can say once and for all, this did not happen, it's not true, or here are the receipts. And I don't know. But what I do know is that you could not ask such questions on Twitter. Leading up to the election between Biden and Trump, I think it was the New York Post, maybe, one of these conservative outlets that had reporters assigned to this story. They were investigating it. They found some discrepancies in the finances of Hunter Biden and his business relationships. And they were asking questions. And if you shared that article on Twitter, you got the hammer. And now here we are over a year into the Biden presidency, and this story has surfaced again, maybe because the right-wing news conglomeration has brought it all back to the surface, but also maybe because we never got to the bottom of it. And there's not a satisfactory answer that has been given with receipts either way. But Twitter won't allow those conversations. They wouldn't allow them before the election. Biden gets elected. Now you can post whatever you want about it to Twitter. It's interesting, isn't it? It's interesting. And hey, even I have gotten the hammer on Twitter. Your humble correspondent, the journalist Wes Anderson. I'm in a shed in Alabama, you guys. And I got the hammer from Twitter last night. Because somebody that I follow, a really cool guy that has a podcast about comic books, and he is a writer of comic books, he posted a joke about how the song Bop from Hanson, you remember that song? Bop a dip a dum jump bop yeah, anyway. That song was stuck in his head. And he was like, I think he said something like, I can feel my hair bleaching as I strum this on guitar. And he was like, what do I do? Help me. And I was trying to be funny. I clicked comment, and I commented on the thread. People were offering different funny solutions. And with a tinge of sarcasm, I said, bleach. I think you have to drink the bleach. I think that's what fixes it. Within about 30 seconds, Twitter banned me for 12 hours. Because they said I had broken Twitter rules by encouraging self-harm or suicidal ideation. Hey, it was a joke. It was very clearly a joke. I was responding to someone that said they could feel their hair bleaching as they strummed a guitar, and so I suggested drinking the bleach. I didn't really want the man to drink the bleach. Something is broken in your algorithm. Or you have somebody whose job it is to look at these things that is like Sheldon Cooper from Big Bang and does not understand sarcasm. So look, this is a complicated issue. I don't know what's going to happen with Elon Musk. He's the hero, the newfound hero of the right. The left thinks he's despicable. The left says this is a private company, and they're right. The right says that this is the public square and that there should be the ability to have some level of free speech there, and I think that they're right, and I'm very curious to see what Elon Musk does. If nothing else, like him or hate him, love him or hate him, the man is interesting. He keeps it interesting. And y'all know how I feel. I've said it on this show 1,000 times. The best critique of the poor is the practice of the better. I don't think banning people or removing their platform or deplatforming them, I don't think it ever has the desired effect that people want it to have. I think it just gives them a bigger megaphone. If you don't like the argument or the point of view or the thinking of somebody, the best thing that you can do is show a better way. And that's what I try to do on Twitter. I share some bad dad jokes, I give thoughts and prayers, do some silly polls, and I try to interact with people in such a way that keeps their humanity intact even if I disagree. And that's what we should aim for. And maybe Elon will help us get there. I don't know. But I am interested to see what happens next. Our last story in the world of politics. Have you rented a car from Hertz? There could be a warrant out for your arrest. Yeah. In recent court documents, Hertz reportedly acknowledged that it files 3,365 police reports about stolen cars involving its customers on average every year. For context, that would mean more than 23,000 of the car rentals firm's customers have had theft charges levied against them over the past 7 years, reports USA Today. A total of 230 customers are now suing Hertz for false arrest, with some claiming false prosecution. One of them is a grandmother who goes by Paula Murray, who was arrested in January 2021 for allegedly stealing a car. My first question is, a grandmother who goes by Paula Murray, is that not her name? Is her name not actually Paula Murray? Why does she just go by Paula Murray? Who is this grandma? I digress. However, she did in fact return the car 5 years before her arrest and had her charges dismissed on March 30th, according to USA Today. It added that false theft cases regarding Hertz rental units have been known to occur, but that the exact number of innocent customers is unclear. The court document shows the group suing Hertz has spent a cumulative 2,742 days behind bars. Additionally, lawyers on the suit claim there are even more warrants for arrest from people who have rented from Hertz. What we know is that 230 is not the majority. It's the tip of the iceberg, said Francis Alexander Malafoy, the lead attorney for claimants. You're talking 20,000 people who were stuck in the criminal justice system because they had a dispute or an issue with their rental, or that Hertz couldn't find their car. One particular situation happened this year to Dustin Pollett, who lived in Helenwood in eastern Tennessee. He had 2 tire problems with vehicles that resulted in him having to get 2 car rentals from Hertz. The second time he went to a local Hertz location on Valentine's Day to exchange a vehicle, he sat in the car for more than 2 hours while he waited for Hertz to process the exchange. Dustin, who had his 9-year-old son in the car with him, then got a call from his insurance company, Progressive, which informed him the vehicle was reported stolen. They can't understand why Hertz has done it, but now Hertz won't even speak with them, and they're placing them on hold and hanging up, Pollett said. The rental car was towed the next day, and a warrant was issued for his arrest. This is crazy. What is Hertz out here doing to these people? One man was even stopped and held at gunpoint by a cop after Hertz reported that his loaned rental car was stolen. The man was later released and has filed a claim against Hertz. Good for him. Moreover, there was another case where Larry Wilcoxon had to end his campaign to serve as a state representative for Florida. The man, who was in his mid-30s at the time, had police officers show up at his door in regard to an alleged stolen car in his driveway that he rented from Hertz. Despite him having a rental agreement and bank statement regarding the rental charges, he was sentenced to 2 years of probation just a few weeks ahead of his election results? How in the world was he sentenced to probation? How was he sentenced to anything if he had a rental agreement and a bank statement regarding the charges? Dude. This was because Hertz claimed in the trial that it had no record of Larry's rental. But Larry had the record. I had to kill all my dreams of becoming a state representative, he said. Look, the man just want to represent the state of Florida, okay? Florida man arrested even though he has the receipts. This is crazy. This is crazy. He don't have dreams of being an NBA basketball player. He not out here trying to be a TikTok star. The man want to represent his state. He want to get some bills passed. And Hertz had him arrested. To make matters worse, he got arrested for a probation violation that sent him to jail for 180 days. A probation violation for a probation that he shouldn't even have been on in the first place. That's wild. Hertz has repeatedly denied the claims made by the customers that say they've been falsely arrested or prosecuted. A spokesperson told The Sun that it cares deeply about its customers and that the attorneys have a track record of making baseless claims that blatantly misrepresent the facts. The suit claims that Hertz has a pattern of missing inventory and immediately files police reports rather than conducting an internal investigation to ensure records are correct. Hertz told The Sun that customers involved in the suits failed to return their cars for weeks or months beyond their due dates. It also alleged that they stopped communicating with us well beyond the scheduled due date. Situations where vehicles are reported to the authorities are very rare and happen only after exhaustive attempts to reach the customer. Apparently, they are not that rare, Hertz. Those who are suing Hertz have filed their claims in a bankruptcy court. The customers are hoping for a similar fate as the creditors in Hertz Chapter 11 bankruptcy reorganization. Hertz agreed to pay back the creditors the full nearly $19 billion it owes them. Customers are, for that price, you could have 1/3 of Twitter. I'm just saying. Customers are looking for more than $500 million in combined damages. Judge Mary Walrath, who oversaw Hertz's Chapter 11 reorganization, heard arguments Wednesday on whether to allow 32 claimants to continue their cases in bankruptcy court. Of those cases, the judge agreed 17 can now move forward along with roughly half of the 230, as they should have been notified about Hertz's bankruptcy claim deadline. Man, so Hertz is just out here choosing violence. Hertz is out here just being wild. They're out here just callously and frivolously ruining people's lives for nothing. You know how angry you would be if you rented 2 cars and had tire problems with both of them? Then the man comes back to the rental office for the 3rd time, and he has his kid with him in the car. He's sitting in the car in your parking lot. And you have the unmitigated gall to report it as stolen. Wow. I guess we shouldn't be that surprised, this coming from a company whose spokesperson used to be the one and only O.J. Simpson. Kind of makes sense now, doesn't it? They have a history with criminals. Hertz will make some assumptions about you. I'm telling you, Hertz is... Enterprise will pick you up and Hertz will lock you up. Oh man, that's terrible. I can't imagine. I don't think I've rented a car maybe twice in my life, and I don't think either time was with Hertz, and I apparently will never do business with them. Because one place your boy don't want to be is in prison. Okay. Wouldn't survive in prison. I'm small, but I'm wiry. Carry sand in my pocket just for in case anybody want to fight me. But I wouldn't make it in prison. I'm not that tough, to be honest with you. Okay. And prison is apparently where Hertz sends you. You rent a car, it goes straight to prison. You do not pass go. You do not get $200. This is one of the more wild news stories that I have seen in a long time. And I actually saw an interview with a couple of these people that have had their lives actually turned upside down and literally ruined, who spent time in jail and could not afford the bail. who returned their cars, who actually brought their cars back. But then a police report was filed many days, weeks, months later. They were arrested and spent actual time in jail. These people deserve money. They deserve money. I hope Hertz have to come out their pockets in a big, big way to pay these people, every single last one of them. This is crazy. But I'm going to take umbrage with the headline for that article because I'm just spitballing here. I'm not a professional journalist by any means, but if I had written the article, if I was the editor for that publication, it would have been entitled Car Rental Company that formerly employed OJ still choosing violence. That would have been the head. I think that would have been a much better headline, is all I'm saying. Hertz is not a company that I will ever do business with, and can't say that I recommend you do either. That's all for the world of politics. Let's switch to the world of sports, and let's hit the headlines. Luka Doncic to miss Game 1 of series with Jazz. Paul George tests positive for COVID and will miss tonight's play-in game. Colts add Stephon Gilmore on a 2-year, $23 million deal. Warriors list Steph Curry as probable for Game 1 against the Nuggets. Packers sign veteran wide receiver Sammy Watkins. Derek Carr gets $121.5 million extension with the Raiders. Armando Bacot and Leaky Black return to UNC for another season. Former USC and Georgia quarterback JT Daniels transfers to West Virginia. And ESPN college basketball commentator Dick Vitale is cancer-free, ringing the bell after receiving chemo. Good for you, Dickie V. That's awesome, baby. It's been a while since we have been able to record the show, so we have a lot to talk about in the world of sports. And let's start with March Madness. Just to give you a reminder, when I went through the bracket with you live on Selection Sunday, I had a Final Four of Duke, UCLA, Tennessee, and Auburn, with Tennessee defeating UCLA to win the championship. My apologies, Kendra from Nashville. I'm so sorry that I picked your Volunteers. I was pretty far off. I was pretty far off. The actual Final Four, of course, was Duke, North Carolina, Villanova, and Kansas. And I got to say that I hated it. Okay. I hated it. March Madness is my favorite time of year. The NCAA basketball tournament, to me, is the very best thing that happens on the sports calendar. And when we got to the Final Four, all the commentators on Fox and ESPN and on Sports Talk Radio, they were all just saying how amazing this Final Four. Oh my gosh, a Final Four with Duke and Carolina and Villanova and Kansas and Blue Bloods. And yeah, no, we weren't excited, bruh. See, most of us hate those teams. Other than Villanova, I got no problem with Villanova. Jay Wright is a heck of a coach. He does things the right way. But Kansas, Carolina, and Duke can kick rocks. Like, I ain't care for any of you. I'm the kids on the bus and they Forrest Gump. Like, the seat's taken. Like, I don't have room for you. I'm not excited about you making another Final Four. I don't want you here. So I actually hated it, and I was far off. I did get a few things right. I did have Kentucky going out early. I didn't see them losing in the first round, but I had them losing in the round of 32. Even though I did have Auburn in the Final Four, I was very clear that I thought it was a distinct possibility they could lose in the second round of the tournament, which they did. And I had Arkansas beating Gonzaga. I knew that was going to happen. I just wasn't a believer in Gonzaga. Arkansas played too good of defense. Gonzaga was a little bit soft on the interior. And I didn't see Michigan playing so well. I didn't see Carolina putting together such a special run. And St. Peter's. St. Peter's was a lot of fun. The way that they played as a team and played together, that was the Cinderella story this time around. And their coach got to go back to his alma mater because of it. Got the head coaching job at Seton Hall. And good for him. He's a good young coach. And he deserved it after the run that they made in the tournament. So the tournament was actually a lot of fun, even if it was a lot of blue bloods that ended up making the Final Four. Was hoping that my Auburn Tigers would play better. Was hoping that they would play better. Miami just ran them out the gym. If you're Auburn and Jabari Smith, Wendell Green Jr., and Walker Kessler all have down games, the chances of you winning are not very good. And on the one hand, to be so disappointed that Auburn lost in the round of 32 in the NCAA tournament is a remarkable thing, because most of my life, Auburn has been terrible at basketball. And the job that Bruce Pearl has done there to not even revitalize, but essentially build a program from scratch is incredible. I mean, it's almost miraculous. But Auburn had the best player in the country, I believe, in Jabari Smith, the likely number 1 pick in the draft. They had the best defender in Walker Kessler, and they just didn't progress. They just didn't continue getting better as the year went on. Early in the year, they looked like one of the best teams in the country. They held the number 1 ranking for 3 weeks. But the last month of the season, they kind of petered out. If you have players like Jabari Smith and Walker Kessler, your offense has to run through those guys. It has to run through Walker Kessler in the pick and roll and getting him touches in the paint. It has to run through Jabari Smith at the elbow in the short corner. And it just didn't. Auburn's offense ran through their guards out front 35 feet from the basket. And too often they would hold the ball until there was 10 seconds left on the shot clock. And that's not a recipe for winning. Jabari Smith needed to be a little bit more assertive. His coaches needed to put him in position to do a little bit better and have more success early in games, especially, and get into a rhythm. And they didn't. Auburn played great defense, but Miami just ran them out of the gym. And on the one hand, it was very disappointing to see a team that had Final Four potential go out in the second round. But there's also part of me that is still in awe of where Auburn basketball is, to the point that Bruce Pearl is just going to reload. He's already signed a 5-star big man, bringing in a 4-star player, looking at the transfer portal, returning a lot of starters and players that played a lot of minutes from this team, and they'll be good again next year. The other team that I follow closely, if you listen to this show, is the Kentucky Wildcats. And I just had a bad feeling about UK going into the tournament. I really did. I was hoping for good things, but I was very nervous. And I told you on my show that I thought that they would lose in the second round. I thought that they were going to lose to Murray State in the second round and be upset by an in-state team. And instead, they lost to St. Peter's. And look, St. Peter's was a lot of fun to watch. They were the Cinderella team. A 15-2 is amazing. But I didn't enjoy that game. When your team is the 2 seed, it's not a lot of fun. And I went to Twitter after the game was over, and I posted a thread. You can find it there if you go to our Twitter page at InTheShed4. And I got some DMs sent to me from fellow Kentucky fans and some text messages from people I know who root for the Wildcats. And so I'm going to share the text that I posted with you, and we'll discuss it together. This was my take on Kentucky's basketball season. One of the more frustrating endings to a season in recent memory for Big Blue Nation. A month ago, Kentucky looked like the best team in the nation. This team had experience, was supposed to have more outside shooting, and even has the National Player of the Year. A Final Four run was not out of the question. Instead, they lose in the first round to a 15 seed called the Peacocks. It's almost unimaginable, even amidst March Madness. This, a year after going 9-16. Coach Cal has done some incredible things, but are Billy Donovan and Brad Stevens happy in their current jobs? I'm not saying to fire a great coach. I am saying start to make a contingency plan. This program has taken big steps back and is not on pace with the other top-tier programs as of right now. Kentucky basketball is in danger of becoming stale, and for the second season in a row, Kentucky fans are looking forward to football season in March. Yeah, that got me the ire of some Kentucky fans. How can you say to fire Coach Cal, and who are you going to get, and Billy Donovan's not coming, and... Hey, Take a deep breath, my dude. Listen, my guy, I'm not saying to fire Coach Cal. I'm not saying he's a terrible basketball coach. But let's be clear. His best years were 2010 to 2015. And since then, Kentucky basketball has not been that good. It hasn't been that consistent. Even the recruiting has started to slip a little bit. The truth is, if John Calipari were not John Calipari, if he had not already won one championship, if he had not been there for so long, there would be some serious questions about his stability and his job security. And on the one hand, I understand the thinking is you can't fire a great coach because who are you going to bring in? And his buyout is like $1 jillion and blah, 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 blah. But let me tell you something. If Kentucky basketball didn't have John Calipari as their head coach, they could find somebody else. There are good candidates that would come to Lexington, Kentucky. Kentucky basketball is bigger than John Calipari. And in recent years, especially the last 2 years, he's really struggled to lead that program. He struggled to get buy-in from players. He struggled to mesh the group together. There's always a lot of turnover. He struggled to find consistent outside shooting. He struggled with rotations and in-game adjustments. And I'm a fan. I'm a fan of Coach Cal, okay? I'm a fan. I'm not dogging the man. I'm not saying he's a terrible basketball coach. I'm not saying he can recruit but he can't coach. I'm just saying lately the results haven't been there. To go 9-16 and then follow that up by not winning a regular season SEC title, by not winning an SEC tournament title, and by losing in the first round of the tournament to a 15 seed called the Peacocks. If it doesn't get better in the next year or so, don't think that there won't be a large segment of that fan base that start to consider their options. And that's all I'm saying. As for the championship game itself, it actually turned out to be a very good game, with Kansas defeating North Carolina 72-69 to win the national championship. And it was the tale of two halves, right? Because in the first half, North Carolina just ran up and down the court. They kept the pace of the game at an all-time high. And Kansas turned the ball over a lot, and Kansas fouled a lot. North Carolina went into the half with a double-digit lead, feeling good about themselves, but also exhausted, and also tired, and also worn down. Hubert Davis came in with a terrific game plan for the Tar Heels. And to be honest, Bill Self did not. He did not come into the game with a very effective game plan. But at halftime, he made adjustments. And in the second half, Kansas had their way with North Carolina. They slowed the pace of the game down. Carolina was tired and worn out and worn down. Kansas was the more talented and the deeper team. And they made a historic comeback and they won the championship. And I don't like those teams. I despise both of those teams. But I was going for Carolina because they were a little bit of an underdog, because I like Hubert Davis as a person and as a man, and because I don't like Bill Self at all. And you just saw recently where LSU ended up finally firing Will Wade for cheating. And that whole probe that came about because of the FBI investigation. Other teams have been put on probation. And the NCAA handed the championship trophy to Bill Self and Kansas, who were a part of that whole ordeal, but haven't been called on the carpet at all. The hilarity and the irony of a group like the NCAA, with all of their issues and problems and lack of leadership and lack of gumption, Mark Emmert walking over to Bill Self and handing him a national championship trophy. I did find that pretty funny. Had a bracket contest in my family, as we always do. My wife, myself, and my 6-year-old. And the kindergartner won. She did. The kindergarten. I never win. I almost never win. I don't know why. I just can't beat my wife and my 6-year-old daughter. If I'm in a pool with my friends, I do well, but my family bracket contest, I do not win. Congratulations, Layla. So to move on to some NFL, oh my gracious, so much has happened since we last talked. It's been 14 days, and the Browns have traded for Deshaun Watson. And Tom Brady is back and has a new head coach because Bruce Arians is moving to the front office and Todd Bowles is taking over. And the Colts have traded for Matt Ryan. And the Washington Commanders, which is still a lame name, have made a lame move by adding Carson Wentz. The Dolphins have traded for Tyreek Hill. And Russell Wilson has been traded from Seattle to Denver. It's like Madden. It's like Madden has come to life in these streets. Quarterbacks don't get traded like this. But hey, points for accuracy to end the shed with Wes Anderson. Because we told you before the start of last NFL season that would be the last season that Matt Ryan played for the Falcons, the last season that Russell Wilson played for the Seahawks. And we were right. We were right. The thing that I was most surprised about was this whole Tom Brady saga. Because I figured that if someone like Tom Brady, as calculated as he is, as professional and intentional as he is, if he announces that he's retiring, I thought that he was done for good, that there was less than a 0% chance he would be back, and he was retired for like a couple weeks and he was back. And then there was the announcement that, oh, by the way, Bruce Arians is no longer the head coach. And now rumblings have come out that, oh, by the way, Tom Brady was trying to do this behind-the-scenes thing where he ended up with the Dolphins and Sean Payton. And that is an interesting story. Tom Brady still is a good NFL quarterback. He had a great season last year. They weren't healthy in the playoffs. They didn't have the pieces that they needed by the time they got through the end of the season. But with Tom Brady, with the weapons that they have, with the defensive pieces that they have, they're going to be competitive. They're going to be a playoff team and have just as good a chance as anybody else. I'm excited for Todd Bowles to get a second chance to see what he can do there in Tampa. He gets to take over with a winning team. And hopefully it washes away the stench of the Jets from his career and from his resume. I think the Colts made a great move in trading for Matt Ryan. They had to move on from Carson Wentz, who is just a shell of a starting quarterback at this point. He's not a good player. He doesn't connect with those around him. He doesn't show leadership. He's fragile. Matt Ryan still has something left in the tank, and putting him into a team like the Colts, I think that was a good move. Tyreek Hill will help the Dolphins, I guess. Tyreek Hill is really fast. Can Tua throw the ball down the field? In the NFL, can Tua throw the ball down the field? We'll find out. And the best move by far to me of all of these is Russell Wilson to Denver. Have we forgotten how good of a quarterback Russell Wilson really is? Russell Wilson is a terrific quarterback. In a week or two, we're going to do our annual quarterback rankings, top 10 quarterbacks in the league. And we'll tell you where he stands on that list, but because Seattle has been so bad, because their offensive line has been so bad, because he hasn't had weapons around him or a defense the last couple of years, because Pete Carroll likes to handcuff his quarterback, we have forgotten, I think, that Russell Wilson is an elite quarterback in the NFL. And I think that he's going to show up at the right time in Denver, a team that has some young pieces, that has a good receiving core, that plays good defense, it's a stable organization. He'll be protected a lot better in Denver. And I expect big things from Russell Wilson in a Broncos uniform. I look forward to talking about the NFL draft, to rating the quarterbacks, to talking about these moves further. But we're going to close out our sports segment by talking some NBA playoffs. Because if March Madness is my favorite time of year, my favorite sporting event of the year, my second favorite is the NBA playoffs, because this is the time that the stars take center stage. This is the time that the young players make a name for themselves, that the coaching matters most, that the players commit to defense. And I'm not a fan of the play-in tournament. I'm really not. I know it's a lot of fun, but I just think over the course of an 82-game season, if you earn a 7 seed, you shouldn't lose it because you lose a game at the end of the season in this silly tournament. You earned your spot. Like last year, hey, it should have been the Warriors in the playoffs and not the Lakers. Okay. And we're not even going to talk about the Lakers. That's the only thing, that comment right there, because they are not playing even in the play-in tournament. And every other sports show has talked about LeBron and Westbrook and Frank Vogel being fired ad nauseum. So we'll address that stuff when the Lakers hire a new coach. But they're not playing tonight, so let's talk about who is. My Hawks travel to play the Cavs in Cleveland, and the Pelicans will play the Clippers, who are minus Paul George at Staples Center. I'm certainly going for the Hawks and the Pelicans in those matchups. I think that they have decent chances to win on the road. The Hawks have had a disappointing season. They made the conference finals last year. Trae Young was electric in the playoffs before getting that ankle injury. They have a young team. They have tons of depth and talent and shooting and size. They don't play any defense. And for some reason, last year they didn't turn it on until Nate McMillan was their head coach. The second half of the season, after the All-Star break, they committed to defense. They rose in the standings. And they decided to try that again. They decided not to play from the beginning of the season. I know they had some injuries early on. They missed guys, but the kind of quality depth they had, there's really no excuse to get off to such a slow start this season. But they have turned it on since the All-Star break. They did win their first play-in game. They have one more. And if they can beat the Cavs, they'll get to play the Heat. And if the Pelicans can beat the Clippers without Paul George, they get to play the Suns. So tough sledding for both of those teams, and those games are tonight. I will be watching. I might be tweeting. Follow us at InTheShed4. So let's go through these matchups, and we will just lay them out how we see them. In the East, the number 1 seed plays the 8th seed, who we're going to say is going to be the Hawks. And look, I think that this would be an interesting series because, A, the Hawks have won like 19 out of 22 games at home. They have Trae Young, who is like 3rd in the league in scoring and 4th in assists. I might have flip-flopped those, but he's in the top 5 for both. He's the only player in the top 5 for both. If the Hawks shooters are making shots, and if Clint Capella stays out of foul trouble, and if they commit to defense, they can beat anybody on a given night. And the Heat kind of have a tendency to play up to or down to their opponents. So if the Hawks win tonight and they play the Heat, I think that has potential to be an interesting series. I think if the Heat were to take the Hawks lightly, and if they had some injury concerns with Bam Adebayo and with Jimmy Butler, and if their guards like Hero and Lowry don't shoot the ball well, the Hawks could cause some trouble for the Heat. And I think that they probably win at least 2, maybe 3 games in that series. But I'm going to go with the Heat. I think they have too much tenacity. I think their defense is elite. I think they're better coached. They have a better culture. The Hawks, they shouldn't be in this position. They should be a 4 seed, a 5 seed at worst. So they have themselves to blame. Hopefully they get off to a better start next year. I think the Heat advance in the series. And you have the 2 seed Celtics versus the 7 seed Nets. The Nets who already won their play-in game to get the 7 seed. And people are starting to pick the Nets to go far in the playoffs. It's becoming a trendy thing to do. Let me tell you, I'm not that trendy. I don't believe in the Nets. The Nets can compete with anybody because they have Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, who are savants when it comes to scoring the basketball. They can give you 60, 70 points in a night. I get it. They also do not play any defense whatsoever. They don't. They play no defense, and their play-in win over Cleveland, they were up 40-20 after 1 in a playoff setting, and they won the game by 7 points. They would hit some jumpers, go up by 10, 12, 15 points, and then they would not play defense 5, 6 times in a row, and it'd be back to a 4-point game, a 6-point game. And this is what the Nets do. This is what they've done all season long. I don't care that Ben Simmons may or may not play. We haven't seen him play in over a year. We don't know what's going to happen when he gets out there on the court. I just don't believe the Nets play good enough defense to make it very far. And I'm going to pick the Celtics to win the series. I think it'll be a back-and-forth series. I think it could go either way. But I think Jason Tatum is just going to assert himself in this series offensively and push the tempo. And I think that Jaylen Brown will play very well. And I love the addition at the trade deadline of Derek White, what he's done for Boston, his ability to push the ball and transition and to get in the paint. And look, I didn't think the Celtics would even make the playoffs. Before the season started, I predicted them to not even make the playoffs. I thought they would be in the play-in games. Brad Stevens has done a tremendous job his first year in the front office. To me, Ime Udoka is the coach of the year in the NBA. I know Monty Williams has done a great job. There's all kinds of coaches that have done a great job, but to me, Udoka is the coach of the year. For the Celtics and the talent that they have to be the 2 seed is incredible. The only downside is they don't have Robert Williams, at least early in this series. If he can get healthy, if he plays at all, it would be huge for them on the defensive end. But I think the Celtics are the tougher team. They have home court advantage. I think that they're more experienced and better coached. And I think that they win the series and move on. The 3 versus 6 matchup in the East is defending champion the Bucks versus the Bulls, 2 teams that are headed in different directions. The Bulls have had a great season. Nobody thought that they would be this good. Billy Donovan is another coach that's done a terrific job. DeMar DeRozan should be about 3rd in the MVP vote. Zach LaVine is a good scorer. But the Bulls have had some health issues, and in the second half of the year, they've really kind of just cratered. Meanwhile, the Bucks are experienced. They're world champions. They have the best player in the world in Giannis Antetokounmpo. Chris Middleton is a good player who's underrated. The Bucks know what they're doing this time of year. They believe in themselves. They have supreme confidence. They play terrific defense. Drew Holiday is a monster. And the Bucks are going to thrash the Bulls. They're going to move on. Then the most intriguing matchup in the East to me, the 4-seed 76ers versus the 5-seed Raptors. And it's put up or shut up for the 76ers. It really is. It's put up or shut up for the 76ers this year because Doc Rivers has had his problems in the playoffs. I know he won a championship in Boston with the Big Three, but he's blown more leads in the playoffs than any other coach that I can think of. And he consistently has failed to make adjustments when things have started to go the other way. And look, Joel MVP to me is the MVP of the entire league. He's had a tremendous season, but his playoff resume is pretty thin. It's pretty thin. Joel Embiid has not ever shown as an NBA player, as an NBA star, he's not shown the ability to be in good enough shape and conditioning to be a factor in all 7 games of a playoff series. You saw it last year in the conference semis against the Hawks. I know he was dealing with some injury issues, but every single game, by the time the fourth quarter, late in the game, in crunch time, when it came around, he was gassed. He was gassed. So is he in better shape this year? Is he able to be counted on when it matters most? And will James Harden even show up? Talk about a Houdini routine in the playoffs. As many points as he scores, as many foul shots as he gets, as many step backs as he hits during the regular season. He's a great stat compiler. Doesn't have the best history in the playoffs. So it's put up or shut up time for the 76ers. You traded Ben Simmons. You got rid of him. You unloaded him. You got rid of Andre Drummond. You included Seth Curry, to bring over James Harden. That's who you wanted. You've got Harden and Embiid. Doc Rivers is a head coach being mentioned for other head coaching jobs. And you're playing a 5-seed Raptors team. A Raptors team that is young and hungry and scrappy and superbly coached. And a team that I think is going to give the 76ers fits. I really do. I think they're going to give them fits because I think they match up well. I don't see Toronto losing any of the games in Toronto. They're too good at home. And as we saw in Game 7 against the Hawks last year, the 76ers are more than capable of losing home playoff games. I don't know. I just have a sneaking suspicion that the 76ers are going to implode and find a way to screw this up. I'm going with the Raptors. In the West, the 1 seed, the best team in the league all year long is the Phoenix Suns. I think they'll play the Pelicans. And I really love that the Pelicans have added CJ McCollum. That was the best pickup in the league at the trade deadline. But they can't match up with the Suns. The Suns win. The 2 seed and the 7 seed is going to be a heck of a series. It's going to be fun. Between two of the most talented young teams in the league, the 2 seed Memphis Grizzlies and the 7 seed Minnesota Timberwolves. And maybe this is a March Madness hangover. Maybe this is because I watched the hilarious celebration of the Timberwolves when they won the 7 seed and acted like they just hung a banner. But I'm gonna go with the Timberwolves to win the series. Ja Morant is incredible. But in the playoffs, you can pack the paint against people that can't shoot the basketball. And Ja is still not that good a shooter. I think that Minnesota has a lot more options offensively than Memphis does, even though Memphis is a great fast break team, is very efficient offensively, has really improved on that side of the floor. I think in the playoffs, some of the guys that the Timberwolves have are going to have an easier time getting to the cup, scoring the ball, shooting the ball well. I expect Karl Anthony Towns to do a whole lot better than he did in the play-in game and to have a good series and to be dominant inside. I think that Pat Beverly will make it his mission to be the most irritating human in the world to Ja Morant. And he won't stop him, but he might just aggravate him to slow him down a little bit. And I think the Timberwolves win. The 3-6 matchup in the West is the Warriors, my Warriors, against the Nuggets. And I got to be honest with you, this is a series that I have a bad feeling about, Warriors fans. I really think it's possible that the Warriors lose this series. Jokic is playing terrific basketball, the dad bod god. He's just a phenomenal player. They run their offense through the center. And he's a tremendous passer. He scores the ball. Kevon Looney can't match up in a 7-game series with Nikola Jokic. And I really think the Joker might average 40 points a game, and he might have to for them to win. But the Warriors have just not looked good the last bit of the season. And even though they're the home team and they have Draymond Green back and Steph Curry is listed as probable, they've had a lot of injury. They've had a lot of in and out in their starting lineup. They haven't played minutes together. Klay Thompson coming back, Draymond Green coming back, now Steph Curry coming back. I just don't know that you can just flip the switch and have that instant camaraderie and ability to play so well together that you had before. I don't think their rotations are going to be solidified and worked out in the way that you need them to be in the playoffs. So here's the thing. I'm going to go with, all that being said, I'm going to go with the Warriors to win the series. But I don't have a good feeling about it, and I think that they could easily lose to the Nuggets. So that sets up a second round that looks like this: the Heat versus the Raptors, and the Bucks versus the Celtics in the East. The Suns versus Mavericks in the West, and Warriors versus Timberwolves. Oh, I didn't even say. The 4 and 5 in the West is the Mavericks versus the Jazz. And I'm going with the Mavs. I think they finally get out of the first round. I know Luka is injured, but I'm just going to guess that he's going to play, and that he's going to play well. I'm going to go with the Mavericks. So in the East, the Heat versus the Raptors are scrappy. They're a good team. If the Heat play to their potential, not only do they beat the Hawks, but they dispatch up the Raptors and move on. Same thing in the Bucks versus the Celtics matchup. The Celtics have had a great year. They've overperformed. They're further along than I certainly thought they would be. They have a lot of good pieces. The Bucks are just a better team. I don't think the Celtics match up well with the Bucks. I think the Bucks move on. In the West, that would mean the Suns take on the Mavericks. And Luka Doncic is a great player, but the Suns are a great basketball team. They have a phenomenal head coach in Monty Williams. Chris Paul, who I can't stand, is a heck of a difference maker and floor general. Devin Booker is a great player. Jay Crowder fits their culture. They have an arsenal of talented big men and bench players, and they're just too much for Luka. And Warriors and Timberwolves, I'm going to assume that Steph Curry plays and that he plays well. And I'm going to assume that first round series against the Nuggets, if the Warriors are to win, that they have time to kind of figure out their rotations, that Steve Kerr gets into a little bit of a rhythm, that Klay Thompson is excited about playoff basketball, that Draymond Green has fixed and corrected some of the defensive deficiencies that have popped up for them in the second half of the year. I'm going to assume all of those things and pick the Warriors to go past the Timberwolves to the conference finals. So then the conference finals would look like this. In the East, it would be the Heat versus the Bucks, and I'm taking the Bucks. I love Tyler Hero. I love Eric Spoelstra. I love Pat Riley. Jimmy Buckets is a heck of a competitor. Bam Adebayo, to me, is one of the best centers in the league. Kyle Lowry is a guard I would love to have on my team. But I just think the Bucks have too much. I think their roster has improved from last year. I think Giannis can impose his will in the playoffs and is confident to do that now after having done it last season. The Bucks go back to the championship. And I think they play the Suns again. I think in the Western Conference, the Suns defeat the Warriors. I think that if the Warriors are healthy, that could be a heck of a series. If the Warriors find their balance, if they begin to play like they were early in the season, they could win. But I think the Suns win. I think we have a rematch in the NBA championship, Bucks versus Suns. I think it goes 7 games, and I think the Bucks repeat. And I don't feel like a lot of people are making that selection. It's popular right now to pick the Nets. It's popular to pick the Heat or the 76ers. It's popular to say the Suns have been the best team all year long. This is their season. But that's why I'm going the other way. And I'm going with the Bucks. They beat the Suns last year. Everything says that this year maybe it's the Suns' chance for revenge. I think Giannis lifts the trophy again. I think he's Finals MVP again. I think they match up very well with the Suns. So there you have it. There's my NBA playoff breakdown and coverage, starting with the play-in games tonight and moving through the entire bracket. We'll see how I do. Maybe I will do better with my NBA coverage than I did with March Madness. Last year, my predictions for the NBA were pretty darn accurate. They were pretty darn accurate. Pat on the back to me. Who do you think is going to win? Who do you have winning the NBA championship? Are you going to go with the Suns, the team that has the best record? Are you going to call for an upset and maybe pick the Celtics? Do you think the Nets will take it all the way? Email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com and let us know. Get at us on Twitter. I would love to hear from you. That's all for the world of sports. Let's switch to this, the world of the paranormal. Our first story in the world of the paranormal takes us to the comics. That's right, my babies. We go into the comics. Marvel's latest issue of X-Men suggests that Jesus might have been a mutant. Religion has an interesting role in superhero comics. In the debut issue of Immortal X-Men by writer Kieran Gillen and artist Lucas Wernick and David Curiel, one major X-Men villain suggests that Jesus may have been a mutant, like the rest of the X-Men. Longtime Marvel bad guy Exodus is an ancient telepath who spent much of his early life as a French crusader named Bennett du Paris, a mutant and religious fanatic. These days, he's in an uneasy alliance with his erstwhile enemies, the X-Men, in helping run a fledgling nation where all mutants, good and bad, can have refuge from human persecution. Unbeknownst to the world at large, the citizens of this new mutant nation have discovered a way to bring people back from the dead, and there's been a lot of tension about the right way to wield this power. That's what sparks Exodus's observation, and this is a quote. The Nazarene mutant inspired a church among the humans by raising a couple people from the dead, he muses. I just watched you beat that in the last 5 minutes. So what does it all mean? Is Jesus Christ, Son of the Living God, a mutant in Marvel Comics? Let's take a look at the evidence. For starters, a core theme of the X-Men comics is that mutants are people too, and having a mutant gene does not fundamentally change their humanity. At their best, the X-Men fight for justice and equality because many mutants face such bigotry, discrimination, and persecution. In other words, mutants are an ostracized group in Marvel Comics, And if Jesus identifies with one group in any multiverse, it's the ostracized. Now, that being said, we're not giving any indication that Exodus knows what he's talking about here. X-Men expert Connor Goldsmith, that's fun to say, X-Men expert, host of the mutant-centric podcast Cerebro, speculated that Exodus would naturally assume any human capable of miracles was actually a mutant, whether or not it was actually the case. It's a perfectly sensical line coming from him, but it's presumably just his assumption, Goldsmith tweeted. In other words, Exodus heard about a man who could heal the sick and raise the dead, and naturally assumed it was mutant power without really considering who the Nazarene was claiming himself to be. In any case, plenty of Marvel characters think of Jesus as God. The X-Men count many Christians among their members. Most notably, the classic blue fuzzy teleporting German Kurt Wagner, nicknamed Nightcrawler, is a Roman Catholic, a former priest, and the subject of a surprisingly theological episode of the old animated X-Men series. I'm going to have to find that. That sounds dope. And don't forget the Illuminator. In the 90s, Marvel teamed up with Thomas Nelson to create a spiritual superhero called the Illuminator, whose powers grew in accordance with his faith in God. It was a short-lived series, but it referenced events taking place in other Marvel comics of the time, so that means that it is a part of Marvel's main continuity, and that it will probably show up on the big screen one day. So yes, Christians exist in Marvel Comics, as do Jews, Muslims, and followers of the ancient Egyptian deity Khonshu. Exodus may be making some big assumptions about Jesus, but look at this fit. Does it seem like the kind of guy who plays it safe when it comes to making assumptions? Yeah. So I thought that was interesting. This issue of X-Men, where a villain whose name happens to be Exodus, like a book of the Bible, and he suggests that Jesus was in fact a mutant. And this is one of those things that a lot of people of faith will hear, and they will be up in arms about it. And they will say that we need to boycott, and that Marvel is of the devil. And I'm over here like, that's interesting. I mean, can you blame him if he's like, hey, Jesus rose people from the dead, and we are mutants, and we're raising people from the dead. Maybe A plus B equals C. But yeah, I've got to look up that episode of X-Men. I used to watch the cartoon as a kid. And that podcast sounds very interesting as well. Happy Easter, my babies. I don't think that Jesus was a mutant just because he rose from the dead. I think maybe it had to do with him being God. But that's just me. And if that's not you, that's okay too. You still my people. From the world of mutants, we go to Scotland for our next story. First Nessie sighting of 2022 as mysterious creature spotted in murky waters. A veteran monster hunter has recorded the first sighting of Nessie in 2022 following a dormant 3 months. Eoin O'Fudigan claimed to observe 2 objects moving parallel to each other on the surface of the murky waters while perusing the Loch Ness webcam. The County Donegal resident, who had his first sighting of the mythological beast more than 30 years ago, has had the incident chalked up on the official list of possible sightings, marking the first time the monster has been spotted this year. The 57-year-old shared the video capture of the virtual sightings, which show strange dark shapes moving about on the surface of the loch. A flurry of sightings were recorded last summer, however, the winter months are usually a quiet time for the monster. When one person commented that the clip could just be of a log or some debris, Eoin responded, "The more northerly object takes a sharp turn to the left, leaving an unusual wake, which you wouldn't have if it was debris, and is not consistent of a seal to react in such a manner." The register, maintained by a team of volunteers, categorizes sightings of the plesiosaur back to the earliest description in the 6th century, when it was reportedly halted in its tracks by St. Columba. The latest entry states, veteran webcam watcher Ian Fagan reported that on the afternoon of the 23rd of March 2022, he noticed wake-like movements involving 2 objects moving parallel to each other at a distance of about 150 yards across the middle of the webcam. 2 black shapes were visible for 1 minute and 44 seconds. Then nothing was seen until another minute and a half. One solid black shape appeared briefly in the same line across the loch where the 2 shapes were heading. The weather is quite good and calm, as you can see from the clip. Yeah, so the first Nessie sighting of 2022. How exciting, my babies. I'm not convinced that the Loch Ness Monster, if it is real, and I think that something is certainly there in the loch. There have been so many sightings for so many years. I think that people are seeing something, but I'm not convinced that it's a plesiosaur. What are the chances that a plesiosaur has survived this long? About the same as renting a car from Hertz and not ending up in jail. Not good. Not good. Yeah, I don't know. I think that watching the video now, you see something, some kind of figure or something. Yeah, I don't know that that's very much, to be honest with you. I'm not impressed by that sighting. It might just be the way that the water, there might be some wake on the water. It might be a log. It might be a seal. I kind of have always thought that maybe a lot of these sightings are some type of large eel. I think people are seeing something. I think that it's possible that it is something that is undiscovered, or that they're not aware is there, or that is a lot larger than it normally would be otherwise. But I'm not sure it's a plesiosaur. And it seems like there's some type of migratory thing that happens also, because it seems like you only see sightings, or you see an influx of sightings at certain times of the year. And I think that should be something that they take a look at too. Do you believe in the Loch Ness Monster? Do you think that it is a plesiosaur? Do you think that it is a hoax? Do you think that it is a misidentification of some sort? Is it a cryptid? Is it a naturally occurring animal? Email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Find us on Twitter at intheshed4. I would love to hear your opinion. All opinions are welcome. I think that it's real. I don't think it's a dinosaur. And this guy saw something. I did not know that there were cameras that you could just go check online. My life may never be the same, because I might just have that thing pulled up on my phone at work, when I'm talking to my wife, when I'm in the car line to pick up my daughter from kindergarten. This is going to be a problem for me. But he saw something. There is something there. I can't tell from the video what it is. It might be Nessie. It might be not. It might be not. It might not be. But I don't think it's a plesiosaur. From Scotland, we go to Mississippi for our next story. River troll humanoid observed and photographed in coastal Mississippi. That's right. We're going to talk the Mississippi river troll. Yeah, this is a real thing, my babies. And if there is a place where there is going to be a river troll, it's going to be in Mississippi. A coastal Mississippi resident believes that they encountered a river troll while on their houseboat. They took a photo and described what they witnessed. What is this creature? The following account was recently forwarded to me. About 6 years ago, my family lived on our houseboat on the river in a small town in coastal Mississippi. We were on the deck one evening looking across the river. The tide was low and you could see well into the woods. Maybe 25 yards from us, something bent down near the water drinking. I went and retrieved my binoculars and took a closer look. It was pinkish tan with bulging eyes, funny-looking ears, 2 arms, 2 legs, and what appeared to be horns coming out of its head. Yeah, at that point, I would run. But I guess if you're in a boat, that doesn't help. I would get out of there. I would make like a tree and get out of there, because that sounds terrifying. It had a short, round body drinking from the shore. From what I saw, I would swear it was like a troll. It was devil ugly. I love that description, devil ugly. I'm going to start saying that. Girl, no, not to a lady. Not to my reflection either. I build myself up, you know what I'm saying. But devil ugly. I took my phone out and took a picture. To this day, anyone I show it to swears it's a river troll. I didn't know that there were different types of trolls. I'm just learning this along with you, but it is a river troll. Living on a houseboat, you see a lot of creepy stuff in the swamp. Also, there would always be trees or logs laying across the ditches of our 1,000-foot driveway in the middle of the swamp, as if something put them there to cross the deep parts. You couldn't walk up or down without feeling this eerie feeling of being watched. And it wasn't just me. Anyone who came our way felt it. You would also hear what sounded like monkeys. One time, something threw a rock and hit my friend. I still own that property and the houseboats, but none of my grown kids will even go out there. I don't show the picture to other people anymore. I don't have to prove anything, but I'm sharing it with you. I feel as if maybe I'm the lucky one to have been in contact with several creatures in the world, and sometimes twice. Yes, it's blurry, and yeah, it's hard to make out, but you can clearly see its reflection in the water as it's drinking. Yeah, a river troll. And I encourage you to look up this picture. This one is interesting to me. I'm not saying I believe in river trolls necessarily, but this picture is interesting. This is better than the Nessie video to me, because you can see something. There's definitely a figure of some sort, and it could be a hoax. It could be a tree limb. It could be something. It could be a very short, rotund person that happens to be devil ugly in Mississippi. It could be a Sasquatch. This man talking about hearing monkey noises and having things thrown at him and seeing homemade bridges. But he thinks it's a river troll. And this picture is really interesting. Yeah, you can definitely see something. It looks like something. It's kind of creepy to me. But the Mississippi, if there is one place for a river troll to exist in this world as an actual thing, I guarantee it will be in the swamps of Mississippi. And hey, I got love for you, Mississippi. My meemaw. Y'all know I love my meemaw. My meemaw lives in Mississippi. But I'm just saying. I'm not saying, but I'm saying. And for our last story this week, we go from the swamps of Mississippi to the skies of Zimbabwe. The still unexplained 1994 Ariel school UFO alien encounter. The morning of September 16th, 1994 began like any other for the children and teachers of Ariel school in Zimbabwe. However, an incident during the morning recess would ultimately capture the attention of the entire world. In total, 62 children would announce to their teachers that spaceships had landed near the school. Furthermore, small men had emerged from the craft in full view of the witnesses, all of whom incidentally would describe the exact same encounter. The late Cynthia Hind would be the first UFO researcher to speak with the children, who would in turn invite equally experienced UFO researcher Dr. John Mack to investigate. From Hind and Mack's efforts and immediate documentation, the encounter is one of the most detailed and credible on record. And, at least officially, the incident is still unexplained. The case still intrigues UFO researchers and enthusiasts today over a quarter of a century later, and is truly one of the most credible and thought-provoking UFO accounts in history. The teachers at the Ariel School in Ruwa, Zimbabwe had a scheduled meeting while the children enjoyed the morning recess on the 16th of September. Although a lone parent who ran the tuck shop was supervising the children, they were for all intents and purposes left to their own devices. It was a Friday, the last day of school before the weekend. As the children shouted excitedly to each other in the schoolyard, several of them noticed a huge silver disc in the sky overhead. There were also several smaller crafts flying around the larger object. Within seconds, a temporary hush spread over the schoolyard as each child turned their attention to the gleaming objects above. As the main craft passed overhead, it looked to land near a small hill on the other side of the schoolyard fence. The children ran to the fence to get a better look. Although the land was part of the school, it was off limits to the children as clearing work was still going on ahead. As they watched, a small man around 3 feet high suddenly emerged from the round object. The children would later describe him as extremely thin, with long black hair and very large black eyes. He jumped down from the craft and began walking in the direction of the fence where the children were watching. Perhaps they let out a collective gasp as only after a few steps he noticed the children stood there and stopped. Meanwhile, another figure stood watching from on top of the craft. After several moments of direct eye contact, the first entity turned and headed back to the craft. Moments later, the ship vanished, as did the smaller crafts overhead. Some of the children would run into the school crying. The area was rich with legends of demons and evil entities, and some of the younger children were convinced that this is what they had seen. The older children, though still unnerved, were experiencing what was later described as telepathic communication with the entity that stood in the field in front of them. Many of them already knew what they had seen. The teachers inside the school were dragged from their meeting amid the commotion. One of them would later state, "We just heard them screaming and screaming. A child cannot make that up," another would offer. "I was very skeptical in the beginning," and that while they believed the children had seen something, they sought a more rational explanation. The headmaster at the school also believed the children's sincerity, but initially thought it best to let the matter rest. Following the weekend, however, the school began to receive phone call after phone call from concerned parents. Each would ask the same question: what had happened to frighten their children so intensely? Realizing the matter required investigation, the school would contact Cynthia Hind. Cynthia Hind, along with Dr. John Mack, would speak to the children individually. Each would share the same details. In Mack's opinion, he was convinced of the children's sincerity and of the authenticity of the case. He would state of the witnesses, "They describe these events like a person talks about something that has really happened to them." He was equally convinced the children were of sound mind. Many of the children who claimed to receive telepathic communications from the dark figure who stood in front of them would have some interesting revelations. One witness would describe the experience like, "All of a sudden, it was just like imaging going through my head, a message, telepathic communication." Another child would tell Hind and Mack that the aliens had arrived to tell us that we don't look after the planet properly. Another even darker view came from another witness. They claimed they received images in their minds of the end of the world, where all the trees would go down and no one would be able to breathe. That's creepy. These details are present in numerous UFO encounters and have been for decades. It's important to remember that the majority of these children, if not all, would have had little to no exposure to UFO encounters in any great detail. With the internet still several years away, even television was far from the wide platform it is now. In short, it's unlikely that all 62 children ages 6 to 12 years old would have concocted and maintained such a deception. Dr. Mack, who was tragically killed by a drunk driver while attending a lecture in London in 2004, was not only a respected UFO and alien abduction researcher, he was a product of Harvard and an experienced psychiatrist. When he began to investigate alien abductions and released the book Abduction, many of his colleagues would look to distance themselves from him. There was even a movement to have his clinical care credentials reviewed. The dean of Harvard would ultimately perform this review and reaffirm Dr. Mack's academic freedom to study what he wishes and to share his opinions without impediment. Mack's contribution to the alien abduction phenomenon phenomenon is invaluable, and the fact that he would so strongly back the genuineness of the witnesses in the Ariel school incident should perhaps tell us of the authenticity of the account. Using all of his professional skills, both as a UFO researcher and a psychiatrist, he would state that the children's voice tone and their body language were so consistent that it was obvious they were telling the truth. They told their stories with such conviction. He would highlight how one child claimed the alien figure had spoken into his mind that the human race should not be so technologed, as an example of the bizarre authenticity to the claims. Others were simply sympathetic to the events, as told by the children. And certainly many who have examined the case since have come to the same conclusions, that the children, whatever they saw, were very much telling the truth. The BBC bureau chief of Zimbabwe, Tim Leach, for example, would also meet and interview most of the children who had witnessed the bizarre events that morning, and he would do so in the immediate aftermath of the sighting. He would state that the incident and the accounts of the children who witnessed it gave him a new perspective on life, on the universe, on everything. There were apparent explanations offered that the pyrotechnic display was in fact a meteor shower. However, there were multiple accounts from other witnesses of these fireball-like vehicles over the region that day. Of even further interest is an incident that took place only 2 days previous, 25 miles away at the Pier House School. On that morning, around 100 school children watched a strange flying craft descending extremely low and looking as though it was about to land. What's more, the radio system that the school bus service used went down completely during the sighting. Was it the same craft that landed in Ariel? At least one of the children who witnessed the incident at the Ariel school had even seen something strange in the skies overhead earlier and joked with her friend that it was a UFO before stating that it must be an airplane. However, she still noted to herself how strange and like a cigarette the object was. Only later, when events at the school unfolded, did she begin to think seriously that what she had witnessed that morning was the same object that had just landed near her school. Another intriguing detail is the description of a noise that appeared to precede the actual sighting of the UFO. This was, according to one witness, a scary noise that sounded as though someone was blowing a flute. This is something that comes up in many close UFO encounters. Not only the whistle or buzz-like noise, but that there's an eeriness to it that evokes an uneasy feeling in those present. One witness, Emily Trim, would state almost 2 decades later that this sound was like a high-pitched frequency, quickly followed by a flash before the craft appeared. Even the descriptions of the colors that flashed, reds, yellows, blues, greens, can be found in many other UFO accounts, as well as the way they appeared to circle the edge of the ship and the speed with which they did so. Of even more interest are the claims from one of the witnesses who stated that some people arrived to examine the land on which the UFO landed. Although the children were not allowed to go into the compound area, she stated that those who went inside found blackened and burned grass where the strange object had been. As we might imagine, not only did the teachers struggle believing fully what the children reported that morning, at least initially, but many of the children's parents also dismissed such wild tales. When they were asked during a documentary around 18 months after the incident how they felt about people not believing them, aside from the expected answers of sad or being frustrated, one child would state that it makes you think it might not be true. Indeed, if this event had been witnessed by only one child, or even 2 or 3, such dismissals might have seen the incident forgotten about before it could reach the next town, never mind the outside world. That there were so many who witnessed the same incident, though, ensured that they drew strength from each other as to what they had seen. While we have mentioned that there was a sighting at a school 25 miles away above, Cynthia Hind would also collect several reports of not just UFO activity in the Ariel area in the days leading up to the sighting, but sightings of strange creatures also. For example, in the days leading up to the Ariel school incident, a mother and her young son claimed to have witnessed a UFO in broad daylight. Perhaps the most unnerving of these sightings, though, came from a truck driver who claimed to have seen strange beings on the roadside one night while he was driving. What is perhaps most interesting about this particular incident are the connections to the environment. One child who made such claims when pushed by Mac would state that such thoughts had never occurred to her before she witnessed a man on the disc-like object. She would claim that they came to her hours later when she was at home. However, she was also very specific in stating that the man had put those thoughts in her mind. It isn't the first time that such environmental issues have surfaced in close contact encounters and alien abduction. If we assume that the accounts of the children at the Ariel school are genuine and not fabricated, and most who have studied the case accept that they are, then what should we make of such details? Whatever the truth of the connection between the Earth's environment, our use of technology, and alien visitation one day might prove to be, it is something that comes up far too often for it to be ignored in terms of UFO and alien research. Indeed, many UFO researchers, including Max, suspect that the issue could very well lie at the heart of the UFO and alien question. Emily Trim, who we mentioned above, was one witness who claimed that telepathic images started coming into their minds, something she would further describe as communication through the eyes. This is an intriguing description. Might the children have not been frozen by fear, but in some kind of trance that forced them to look at this strange creature? It's perhaps also interesting that Trim claimed these images and messages revolved around technology and how humans were using such technology in a bad way. Trim would further state years later that it happened to her as though some kind of energy had surrounded them during the encounter that appeared to stop time. Remember, Trim also declared that she could not be certain how long the incident occurred for. Might it be that time, for all intents and purposes, did not exist for the children who witnessed the strange events that morning, as it does for us normally? What is further interesting here, although the incident, at least on the surface, is a close encounter with a UFO and its occupants, such details surface most often in alien abduction cases. Might this be the case here, only the abduction or the object of it was carried out within the energy shield as described by Trim? Maybe, we'll never know. So, that is the story of the Ariel UFO school incident. And when it comes to stories of sightings of UFOs or alien beings, this is the one that I find most interesting and most credible, because it was more than 60 people who saw this, who all told the same story, and not just initially, for decades. If you're not familiar with the details of this story, I encourage you to do some further research. Go read about it, watch some interviews, watch the documentary produced by the BBC. I remember seeing these kids as adults return, several of them returned to the site where they had had this experience, and how emotional and moving it was, and how they broke down in tears, and how after having years apart and moving on with their lives, they embraced each other. They talked about what they saw. They remembered it, even as adults, they remember what they had seen and experienced as children. It's wild. What happened at this school in Zimbabwe for 60 some odd people to describe what they described and to experience what they say they experienced, and for their story to have never changed, and for trained Harvard educated psychiatrists and documentary makers and journalists to investigate and say, we've come to the conclusion that we believe these children. Something happened. They saw something. They experienced something that was so far beyond their comprehension. And certainly most of them believed that it was aliens. I don't know what it was. Your boy wasn't there. I was 5 years old at the time, not living in Zimbabwe. But they saw something. Some type of craft landed. Some type of creature got out. And something about that story is always giving me the heebie-jeebies. Like, to me, it's kind of a scary story. All these children are by themselves. One adult that's sort of paying attention to them, and they have this experience. It's kind of creepy. And yet the messages that were delivered telepathically to these children were about our use of technology and about how we're destroying the planet. And the one kid that saw images of trees all going down and people not being able to breathe. Not only is that scary, but that's real. Like, at some point that's going to happen, and to see imagery of that in your mind as a child is bizarre. I have no doubt in my mind these kids saw something, experienced something. This is real. This isn't a made-up story. Like, I encourage you, investigate this one. If you think this is made up, please get at me. Email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Find me on Twitter. Get at me and let me know how this was a fake. I've heard the crazy, wild theory before that this was some type of military experimentation, that this was even a Nazi. I've even heard this was a Nazi craft, which, in 1994, right? What Nazis are we talking about? But that this was some type of Nazi craft that landed, that soldiers were what got out, or that children who had been experimented on got out of the craft. I've heard it explained away as time travel and as a hoax. I don't think any of those things explain what happened at the Ariel school. If I had to take a guess, I guess I lean toward aliens, because I don't know how else to explain it. Angels? Did they see angels? Did they see aliens? Did they see time travelers? They saw something, and it affected them greatly, and it was terrifying, and it was bizarre, and it was otherworldly, and it's one of the coolest stories that there ever is when it comes to UFO sightings in history. The Ariel School UFO incident, unsolved to this day. What do you think happened? Email the show and let me know. That's all for this week. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. I can't either. It's back in the house and out of the shed for me. Thanks again for listening to episode 38. Make sure to subscribe, like, share, and review. It really does help. If you have any paranormal experiences, opinions about sports or politics that you'd like to share, you can email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Again, that's intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. I might even read it on air. Look for us on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, iHeartRadio, the Good Pods app, or wherever you listen to podcasts, and make sure to follow us on Twitter at InTheShed4. Tune in again next week when we'll hit the headlines, talk some sports, and take an in-depth look at the War of the Worlds broadcast of 1938. This has been In the Shed with Wes Anderson, the best news show in the land covering politics, sports, and the paranormal. Have an adventurous and fulfilling weekend. I'll catch you tools later. Peace out, Boy Scout. Meemaw, we made it!